Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Fernanda Dentes. I'm International Affairs Manager at CBL. It's and a Brazilian publisher. It fosters the Brazilian reading process between the investment in Apex Brazil. On behalf of Brazilian published CBL Apex, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. This live and the other agenda in Frankfurt Book Fair is promoted by means of this partnership. I remind you that we are going to have this chat every day at 11 o'clock in Brazilia's time. Tomorrow, we are going to have a table to talk about Machado de Assis on Friday. We're going to have a chat about the partnership um, about and children writer, and on Saturday about Brazilian indigenous tribes. We have the chat here. You can write on it, and we developed a special playlist for you with Brazilian instrumental music so that it can follow your reading. This playlist is available here for you, and we have the link on the chat. On Saturday, we are going to have Book Fest online. 12 hours of official agenda in our fair. Inside this agenda, Brazil is going to have two literary tables and a happy hour. We are going to have the participation of Paul Scotch and Mr. Alcioli. Our caipirinha hour that is very traditional that unfortunately couldn't happen in our stand. It's going to be opened by Vitor Tavares. It's going to be on inside our agenda here online. To, Today we have a very special table, round table here. We are going to talk about manga, comics, illustrations. We have two super talented illustrators from Brazil, Fido Nesti and Eloar Guazzelli. Who's going to moderate the session is Rodrigo de Faria Silva. He's a writer and editor, and now he has his own publisher. He has several books published as a writer, organizer, and as a writer. He has more than 100. I wish you all a great session today. Fernanda, thank you very much for this invitation. CBL, I follow this project since the beginning of this beautiful project by CBL. It's a great honor, pleasure to be here with Fido and Guazzelli, two great artists, and I've also worked in comics parts. That's why I was invited to this round table. I had the pleasure to publish Guazzelli's latest comics, and maybe in the future I have the opportunity to publish something by Fido as well. I'll introduce them quickly here, and uh, and then I'll give them the opportunity to talk about themselves, any points that they would like to address during this round table. And then we go to the Q&As and have more discussions. Guazzelli is illustrator, animator, and a comic artist. He has been working in it since 1990. He illustrated Demônios, Tales by Aloysio Azevedo, Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarelo by Monteiro Lobato, and recently Porto Alegre and A Casa Azul. They are two albums that Guazzelli published in April. Fido works with illustrations and comics for over 30 years. You can see his works on Folha de São Paulo newspaper or New Yorker magazine, among others, and the cover of several publishers, comics. So the most recent one is going to be launched by Companhia das Letras. Well, Guazzelli, if you want to have the floor, about 5 minutes, just to talk a little bit about the comic, art, comic design, your life, a quick introduction. 5 minutes for you, 5 minutes for Fido. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I'll be brief. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. Everything here is pleasant for me. The institutions that I respect so much, and I am among friends. It's more than mates. This is not a formality. This is a reality. There are friendships that we extend them a little bit because of distance, but we have extreme respect for them. And I'm
Eu não
extremely
estudei para a
comfortable to be
prova,
here.
eu
I
considero
didn't
aqui
study for
hoje,
the
porque eu
test
trabalho
that I consider it like that because I've been working on in this field for over 30 years. The Brazilian comics that we have high level authors, writers, and now they are finding an audience that it was harder in the past, but it's improving now. And before anything else, I'd like to talk about literature. We have an environment here that we are going to address this topic. In my case and Fido's case, we have adaptations. We have language translations. I don't like the word adaptation very much because it's very reductive. I think it seems to be something technical, but it is more than that. And in the movies they call it adaptation, but they don't like it as well. So this dialogue among these languages and dialogues, I start from the literature. From my side, this was conveyed by my parents. My parents, the late ones, they died already. They gave me this legacy, and this built up my artist side, and then I had the happiness to advance and make connections, connect the dots. And it's inevitable to say that we are in an extreme transformation crisis, and it hurts a lot. My first reaction when we think about global warming, value crisis, a new world emerging, a new empire over there, and we are groundless, I may say so, a little bit insecure, and literature may save us. I call literature the artistic making, as literature starts back then, millions of years ago. It has a consistency that is fundamental for me. Literature is more than an ornament, intellectual ornament, more than a distraction. It's a salvation path many times. In this period that my children they are afraid, my family is afraid, they see in literature a path to transcend art, and it's important to make it clear no art, it's not one piece of art. All arts, including literature, they are not ornaments. They are a framework that allows us to live there. I've experienced too love disappointment. I was saved by a piece of work by Gabriel Garcia Marques and a poem of Benedette. So I'd like to say that because we live in a world, I'm going to wrap up just saying that my life has been this happiness to work with these different kind of languages. It's very logic and wonderful to make this bridge today between literature and the comics, two incredible and substantial pieces of art. Uh, the difference between the optimist and pessimist is the following. Imagine the following. Imagine a car that lost control, led, driven by a person that is out of control as well. People inside this car, they are struggling with stopping it. What is a pessimist? A pessimist says, next curve, we are going to capsize and we're going to be dead. The optimist says, the last curve, the police will be there with a system there to stop this car. Optimist, pessimist. The earth is this vehicle today. It's fundamental to be here. Nobody here is as an ornament here, but I need to open with that. Literature, art, publishing, book fairs, poems, they are fundamental not only for noble work of entertainment, they are much more than that. It's with great joy that I'm here to discuss this topic, that it is both light, fun, it must be like that. And on the other hand, it's my salvation board. I had never read so much in my life without any hierarchy criteria. So I thought I had read The Lord of the Rings, but no, I had read only Hobbit. I thought that I would reread The Lord of the Rings, and in the same time, I'm reading Bugabot from the 30s. It's a Soviet book,
Os livros um do
and I
lado do outro
have
para ver se eles
fun
brigam,
putting
se
the books
harmonizam.
there to one beside the other to harmonize them, but there isn't any hierarchy, only quality. I said to myself, to my children, my students, whoever I love, read a lot. Not to show off, to boast, it's to make this cross that we are doing. The earth is dead. It's a cycle of destruction and rebuilding. Thank you very much for being participating here a little bit to this extent. It's not little. Each grain regarding intelligence, thoughts will help us a lot. I'm really happy to be here. So I surpassed 30 seconds. I'm right on time. Great. Now it's you, Fido. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor. It's an honor to be talking to Guazzelli. I'm a fan of his works for a long time. Rodrigo, that I've just met, but I found out that I know he is publishing work. After I'll talk about it, and it's a great honor to be participating in Frankfurt Book Fair and talking to people from all over the world. And Guazzelli opening with his remarking words made me remember that I am here not by chance. It's because of my parents. My mother, she used to paint, she has always painted. My father worked as a publisher, advertisement person, but he started publishing comics on newspapers, and he illustrated several books by Monteiro Lobato for Brasiliense publisher. And I continued his work decades after, and my career mixes up with illustration and a comic designer. When I am illustrating, I say I'm an illustrator and then I am a comic designer. Sometimes I delve into comics because each project takes a long time. I'm a comic designer, I'm an illustrator, so things take turn from time to time due to the market. I'm becoming more and more comic artist, designer because of a trend. And when I have some free time, I am illustrator. And both ways give me great pleasure. The same as Guazzelli, I'm crazy about literature. I love working with it, the adaptations I made, and now I want to face up to a challenge to work on my text, my writing, everything um, coming together. For this, I have the book 1984 that will be launched in the beginning of November with my work there. And I think it came as a reward for me. All the parallels we can trace from honor work. His view is very strong, and I have a triple dystopia since the beginning with oral works, and right after it, our new government, and now a third dystopia, the pandemic. So I delve into a triple dystopia, try to keep myself sane, and very soon you're going to see my new work presented, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it. It's really good to be here talking to you. It's a great honor, great pleasure to be here.
Começar aqui com algumas perguntas.
I'll start here with some questions.
Os espectadores que tiverem interesse em
The viewers, if you are interested to send questions, please use the Q&A here at the bottom of
do
the
Zoom,
Zoom page here.
já tem alguma
Oh, I think there are some questions coming here. I saw it. Don't send it on the chat. Send the questions on Q&A, please. And the proposal of this table, I forgot to present this topic. It is the comic literature in which the text is not the main part. You talked a little bit about literature, and I noticed that currently we come across books in which the narrative is made by images, and the comics we see it clear. And in the illustrated books, children books, mainly in the children books, we notice that there is an entangling, a follow up, passing the baton there from text to text, creating a narrative using these two elements with equal weight. With equal importance to understand the narrative, the text, and the illustration. Comics it has this wide open this ninth art because it involves several arts comics for to me. Well, I didn't used to read many comic books when I was a kid, but after I started working with it and I started understanding the bigness it has, so the screenwrite narrative dialogues and the topic of this table to get to narrators, others, writers using image many times to express the text. As Rodrigo said, as he said that he's going to work with, as Guazzelli has done sometime. And I'd like to consolidate this topic of this roundtable explaining the narration of images, the text, and this relation. And we can go to our first question. When you adapt, or okay, so the illustration, text, we are going to talk about them more to the end. But when you adapt them, what's the suppression of the text, the replacement of the text by an image, in order not to make the text very repeated, in order not to illustrate what is written? How do you do this work? Fido, would you like to start?
Assim, existem estruturas para fazer
So
isso.
there are structures, frameworks to do that, but I'm not a very expert on that. I use more intuition. You format the page, you divide the chapter. In the case of an adaptation, a chapter of the book, you change it. The first step, you synthesize it, you take notes about the parts, and when you put that on the page, the greatest challenge is to synthesize it in order not to make things redundant. It's not to show a picture there where you see the image and it is just a repetition of the text. So it comes from imagination of the artist. You must have a fine tune to put together where the text ends, where the image starts. The person has just read it, and you get some plus to add to the images. It's very intuitive. There is no way to explain how I do it. It's good that he spoke before me. Was so it's good that you talked about intuition. We it goes through intuition, and in addition to work with that, I studied comics at USP. My master's was about Zé Carioca. It's a famous character in Brazil comic books. I could talk hours about it because, among other things, the text grows in determined comics. The North American comics from the beginning of the 20th century, in my opinion, is the best. It has so much text that it influences the soap opera. For example, series that you see on Netflix. You say, oh, they are really good in dialogues. Oh, this family uh, series, this kind of thing starts in the comics. And then, together with the cinema, we had an explosion of mass culture. for the good and evil. When we talk about streaming, mass productions, we think it's only bad, but it's not. And some people judge comics by the vulgar expressions. If we did the same about the movies, it would be the same. It's part of it. And the comics, they surpass this prejudice. And today, we have the independent comics, American ones, they have overdoses of texts, but it varies according to the context. It has association with the image. These hybridism and these mixings, they are really complex. We have comics with a few images. You may say, I like it or not. And these popular comic books in North America, so I am 58, I can say that it has a classic name there. It was a comedy about family values. It started there. As a researcher, I say, everybody says that Argentinian movies are wonderful and they come from comics origin in Argentina, in France, in the US and Japan as well. But Argentina and France, you have comics for writers. It's not only focused on children only. We know that in France, we have the second and third most important ministry because they focus a lot on culture. They read comics. They read a high level, intellectual level comics. In the Argentinian part as well, because the comic screenwrite it's a path for the movies. These relations they are really intense, but we have very short time for that. I adapted Grandes Sertãos Veredas. I transcribed it, and it is one of the greatest work in the world literature. Either you like it or not, this is another thing. It's very close to Don Quixote. It's a story inside the story inside the story. When they came after me, I remember about Ernesto, one of the best screenwriter and writer in Argentina. They asked him, "What would you adapt for the movies?" He said, "Surely Don Quixote. Don Quixote doesn't fit a movie. Even the Soviet people that they didn't worry about marketing part, they did 7 hour movies. They didn't dare to adapt to Don Quixote. You can do, a, for example, 12-hour movie. It doesn't fit. So this artist said, he said, I would take a part of Don Quixote, the island part, and it would fit inside a movie. I thought about it when I thought about Grande Sertão, because I thought, oh, I can't adapt it, not because it's comics. To adapt it for the movies would be the same problem. For theater, the same problem. I thought, oh, it would be a prison theater play. Wonderful. This is a foundation book for Brazil. As the language is complex, you must allow yourself to get in it. It's a masterpiece when you get in it. But I said, oh, I need to adapt it because I need the money. I will accept the challenge. We have the dialogues, the challenges, and I said, I will take this challenge. And I became a killer because Bergman, talking about movies, he said, to talk about movies, you kill your darlings. You must clip. Otherwise, your movie becomes really bad. The adapting art is a clipping art. When you clip, when you cut Guimarães Rosas, I felt myself as a murderer, but it was necessary. I tried to maintain the basic structure. I received an award because of that. I'm sorry to show off here, but it was acknowledged. This work was acknowledged. I was awarded. I was screenwrite. I didn't work on the drawings. I left the essence of the story, and then I found another pearl, the poetry of Guimarães Rosa, something that is almost impossible to translate. For example, the gun bullet, when it thinks. If God comes to the savannah, comes with a gun. So I maintained the poet there, and I managed to do this crossing, which was to bring the essence. It's a very hard work. Wrapping up, I also adapted, they gave me gifts, awards, a genius of the Brazilian literature to adapt. And I adapt theater plays, Pagador de Promessas by Dias Gomes, that I love. And Bem Amado, I did it, but it wasn't published. The hardest to clip off is the theater play because there you have a flow. They create a talk, a dialogue to maintain that people that are watching it. It's false and real in the same thing. For theater plays, it's really, really hard to adapt it. I hope to have brought some information. So, linking to that, Fido, can you talk about the adaptation of Don Quixote and the adaptation of Lusíadas?
Sim, sim, desculpa. Eu também me identifiquei com o que o Guazzelli
I
falou.
also
No caso do
see eye to eye to what Guazzelli said. In the case of Lusíadas, I think it would be impossible to sum up everything that he writes and try to put everything in a single book. It's something really huge.
eu fiz
And
bem como o Guazzelli
I did the same way that Guazzelli said what he did about Grandes Sertões Veredas. I chose parts that were the most remarkable parts when I read during school time, and I put it there in whole, some important parts. In the case of 1984, I managed to put together all the chapters in the three parts from the book, but I feel like as someone editing a movie, you cut off and you mend things, you clip things, and trying to maintain the essence of the work, and in order not to disfigure it. But each adaptation goes in a way. This is it. And one question here, I don't want to go in depth in that, but it's a coincidence in both works of you guys. Guazzelli adapted Capucci from Bonaparte course, and you, 1984. Both books they talk about an authoritarian society from the sci-fi, and we have this topic. And in the case of the course, it's something related to the real Nazism that happened. And what's the difference to analyze them? Because they have a kind of political wedge, theology there behind the narrative. I was wondering, of course, Guimarães has it, and Lusíadas has this view, but it's not only political. I was wondering if there is any difference in this kind of adaptation from a book focused on literature, pure literature with a narrative constructions, without the possibilities, and a book that has these all narrative literary resource and feature and brings a political ideology. Do you maintain this political ideology in the adaptation you make? Guazzelli, would you like to start? Yes. So I'd like to say that first, my challenge is the quality of the work, and I've always had great honors in the illustration, Faulkner, among other artists. I'm afraid of my brothers, my mother. I also worked with Monteiro Lobato. I'm really sorry that she hadn't. She didn't have the opportunity to see it because she loved it. I'm really sad because she didn't see it. She only saw my other things. My awards they used to belong to my mother, and now she's not here to share this pleasure with me. And the political talk has a weight. It's present in some works that apparently they are not so openly political ones. It has a personal density. And my father worked as a lawyer with the political prisoners. His life was at risk, family as well. So, and this became something personal to me. And I was 7. I was hidden, of course. I was looking at his lawsuits and I heard his talks. I was 7 and I lost my innocence. I know about terrible tortures. I look at my children, their innocence, and I want them to keep it that way. And I had a kind of scar because of that. And I have a humanist militance. It doesn't prevent me, stops me from voting, but I'm really, really afraid of human beings. I must confess that I am a funny person, but I know how far human beings can be a monster. And maybe it is your neighbors. Um, in the Second War, Bosnia War, there was, for example, a psychiatrist. He was terrible, but people say, "Oh, you must believe in it. You must believe in it." But don't try to convince me of that. You can teach a child, not me. I am already 58, and I have these Arwal feelings. And Capucci was one of my father's favorite books. His father is German, mother is Italian. He created this playing around with Bonaparte. He was the connection guy. Capucci and Apelli, they are two masterpieces of literature. So when I was 12, I was reading Capucci. He tells everything with elegance. It was a happiness with when Alexandre, publisher, therapy taught me to like whoever likes me, and I'm really thankful to Alexandre. And I won an award, a Jabuti, and Rodrigo in second place with the Grande Sertão. Capucci was the first, second time that an editor tells me, Guazzelli, what do you want to do it? I had done some interesting works. I made an adaptation of a TV program by Regina Casé, Brazilian Trees, and they said, "Oh, Guazzelli, you do whatever you want." Oh, I was used to the past that I suffered a lot. Oh, how come I do whatever I want? Yeah, you can do whatever you want. And I thought about Capucci. And I was making the calculation about the copyright. The copyright is not released, and the publishers they said, "Oh, we go after it." And then I said, "Oh, why didn't I work with a Porto Alegre or more a simple book?" But that's a good job because we worked on it right now. But I worked with Caput book. It was the dream of my father. It was a man that followed the horrors of human beings. My father talked to them, and he managed to save people from the torturers and to survive that in order not to commit suicide. He had to write Bonaparte, and my father had to read it. Of course, there is a personal dimension. It's unbelievable. And on the one hand, we have the old responsibility to have at the level of the books. There are some friends who are really angry at me because I adapted it, but I felt really happy. And now I'll give the floor to Fido. And you feel a little bit oppressed because of the topic itself. You see, Fido, I shared the time. I'm very polite. It took me 58 years. It was my birthday yesterday. And I tell Fido that there is this density that oppresses us, suppresses us, but art is a shout saying it's not going to happen. Read it in order to prevent this from happening. I think the great reasoning of art is to take off the lid, to say the things. If you're silent, you are walking toward disaster. So now, Fido, the floor is yours. Guazzelli gave me the floor with a link there. Our wall work was that. It was an alert. Pay attention. Look at what might happen. It's unbelievable that after so many years, this is still happening, and we can see that happening. And my first reading in 1984 was in 1984. I borrowed it from my brother because he had read it. We studied in different schools, and he this book was adopted by his school. And then I borrowed it, and I was 13 years old, and we were leaving dictatorship, and that was good to me because I could remind myself of what was going on. Those evil characters, generals, military members. I was 13. I read the book and I felt tremendous anguish to see what happened, and might happen in the future. And it is interesting because now in 2020, rereading the book a year and a half ago, you if you try to see the view of overall in 1948, what was 1984, reading it in 84, and comparing, making parallels, what he imagined, what it would be like, look what really happened, and reading now in 2020, I see that unfortunately he got it right. The things that he wrote there, the increase of totalitarian governments throughout the world, and the particularities of vigilance, monitoring of the individualism of the human beings, and the screens which are on our hands. For example, our mobile phone. Guazzelli is there looking at his. No, I'm just kidding, Guazzelli. I'm drawing. Oh, I thought you were at your mobile. Yeah, everybody is stuck to it. The fake news. We have the hatred, office, many parts that he put in the book. We can see it.
Hoje em dia eu enxergo pior
We can see it now. 2 minutes of hatred he mentioned. I see 24 hours of hatred uh, using these screens that we have today. When barking at each other, nobody gets to any conclusion. Um, crime thought. The other day I was in an elevator. I was there reading in depth, rereading the book, taking notes. I took the elevator. I got the elevator. I looked at the screen, the vigilance screen of the elevator. Smile, you're being monitored for a second. I changed my facial expression because I was thinking about something political, very likely. I thought to myself, oh my, yeah, to maintain everyone should maintain a similar face. People couldn't have an expression of disapproval, or that you would have an autonomous thought or your own idea. You must be in compliance, acting according to the state that governs you.
Então, 1984
So
foi.
1984, Fido, it was an option of yours as Capucci with for by Guazzelli, or it was ordered. No, it was an invitation by Emilio Fraga. He's a great writer, and I was developing another piece of work to present to him. He said, Fido, stop it a little because there is a project here. When he told me, I couldn't believe it because it's a book That is one of my favorite books, and it couldn't have come in a better moment. It was a wonderful invitation. The three comic books that I made, four, right? That I've done so far, I received the invitation. I haven't chosen the writers, the other. I was chosen by
Uma
them.
pergunta assim mais técnica mesmo. Quando é
A
que
technical question: what's the
você
difference
diz, né,
between working as a
que você
screenwriter and you as
é roteirizou
Guazzelli? He said that
o
he
Guimarães
did the screenwrite, not the
e você
illustration of Guimarães.
ilustrou
And there were
o
HQs that you illustrated
Eloar,
and created the
porque
screenwrite,
claro, quer dizer,
and the other way around.
existe muito, eu vejo muito
So
livro
this mix I see in the European comics, what Guazzelli said, Zidru is
ilustrando o outro.
illustrating one book, working on the text of the others. They are screenwrite and they like being both, and they have the illustration talent, which is something more a more sophisticated talent or more explicit, let's say so,
Como é
in
que
the
é você
graphic
trazer um roteirista
novels.
como
What's this really relation between screenwrite of an HQ? Can I talk about it? I had the honor to be called to do Grande Sertão by Alexandre Barbosa, a great friend that worked at Global TV channel broadcast, and he says he's my fan. So he called me. He was really uh, uh, walking on his toes, and he's saying, Guazzelli, it's not to draw, it's not to illustrate. It's one of the greatest um, uh, praise that I received. There are some illustrators that are only illustrators, screenwrites who are only screenwrite. This hybridism we have in Europe, some brothers by Moon. There were a change. There were some changes, but we, for example, this partnership that there is in Europe, we need it here. It doesn't mean that I want to do it. It's cool, but it varies from person to person. I felt really great honor. He says, "Oh, I admire you by the text," and he invited Rodrigo from the south. Now he's living in Portugal, Rodrigo Rosa, and I felt extremely honored. It's rare to work with another screenwriter. I worked on Vidas Secas as well. I worked with other screenwriters. Otherwise you feel yourself, contained, restricted. And in this case, we had freedom and the risk of creating a worse piece of work. I hope I did a good work there. What I call freedom is because the responsibility is all yours. Is this wonderful? Yes, but the burden is also bigger. And in the case of Rodrigo, um, as Rodrigo is also an artist, a designer, I did something that Alan Sieber did with his father, my great friend Alan. When both are illustrators and we have a deadline to reach, I said, why to write the Poroca farms? I suggested, Rodrigo, I'm going to do a kind of draft sketching of the page, and I'll put the fundamental points of text. This accelerates it, but you can do that when you have a deeper respect and you trust the other person, that the other person doesn't see that as an imposition. I did something that one of the most delicate things that can be done. I'm talking about it because it worked out. I'll do a kind of exhibition after some time. I have Grande Sertão Veredas only with images, okay, illustrations, with a rough, because it was an honor that Rodrigo interpreted it, reinterpreted it. There wasn't enough text. It's a respect game, actually. I can only think that another screenwrite will work. Sometimes it doesn't happen. sometimes the publisher impose a screenwrite, and if you don't have the intimacy that you have with a friend or a person that you worked with before, it is a problem. In my case, Rodrigo and Arnaldo, I respect them and we have synergy, we have intimacy. It's wonderful. We are really close. So this is my personal opinion. I'm very individualist. I hope to have more partnership in the future, and I love developing my own text. Among other things, I like writing and illustrating as well. And sometimes people misunderstand it. People think that I am only illustrators. It's not only illustrators. I know illustrators, painters that are genius. Fido's brother Zed is one of the best artists in Brazil. It's a person that I have great respect. When I paint, I think about him. Should I do
É
it?
isso mesmo, Guazzelli.
What would Zed talk about it?
É, não, o meu irmão também, ele é o verdadeiro artista
So
da
my
família.
brother, he's the artist of the family.
Com as minhas artes,
I'm
por parte.
just a follower with my art. He has screens that everybody must see it.
No caso de trabalhar como
In the
roteirista,
case of
assim,
working as a screenwriter,
a única experiência que eu tive com alguém
the
vivo
only
mesmo
experience
foi a
that
Vanessa
I
Bárbara.
had was with Vanessa Barbara, who was alive. It was an invitation from Companhia das
Fazer uma
Letras,
parceria com ela
Patricia, to make
para
a partnership with her about Makina Goldberg. And as she didn't have experience to write for comics, she gave me the text and I formatted it, showing her what I had done. I received several proposals to establish a partnership, but
Então, assim, eu gosto de trabalhar sozinho,
I like working alone. I like to create my own screenwrites.
eu fiz textos
Camões and
para
Arl, I
grandes
did
editoras,
it all by
então
myself.
não tive essa
Obviously,
experiência, assim,
I didn't
com
have this
roteirista, né?
experience with
Mas
screenwrite,
achei bem
but
bacana isso que o Guazzelli
I
falou,
found it
justamente
really
imagino
good
que
what Guazzelli said. To make it
vocês
work, I think this is
podem
it. You must have a strong synergy with the
para
person
não atropelar o outro, né?
in order not to surpass the other one, surpass the limits.
Então acho que a
We
coisa
must have
flui ao
respect.
verdadeiro.
Otherwise, things become a
Vamos
nightmare.
passar um pouco. Tem umas três perguntas que
So I
mandaram aqui.
have three
Só que
questions
a
people
gente não vai ter
asked
muito tempo.
because if I have all my questions answered here, we are going to use up the time. There is a pandemic talking about pandemics, the artist works.
Resumindo, o que que mudou um pouco
In a
da dinâmica
nutshell,
dos
what
projetos
changed
aí com a
in the
pandemia?
dynamism of your work during the pandemic and the way that
Os
you do
editores,
your work, you go
como é que
after
eles
the
estão
publishers to display your
se
works?
se a pandemia
How
impactou de
was
alguma
this
forma?
for you during the pandemic
Você quer
time?
começar?
Did you have any impact? Can I start? I'm going to be fast. So the first thing, I'm hurt with Fido because he said that I was looking at my mobile phone. I am a compulsive artist. I was drawing. I am compulsive. I see much concern about these overdoses of mobile phone. I'm not conservative. I'm not, but I don't have total faith in progress. So we have a civilizatory crisis that involves this. So create, read, draw is fundamental to put everything in its right place. The pandemic in my personal life it doesn't didn't change a lot because I do home office. I work at home and I work in a I live in an island. It's close the street here in São Paulo. I go nowhere. In my personal point of view, what happened was it didn't change a lot. The idea of death, extinction, but it's like they invented it right now. People think that they are going to die inside an airplane, and many times the airplane is safer. So this extinction risk, I have two concerns. One is with my children. I lost all my fears in the beginning of this year. And my fundamental fear is my kids. I want to be present. And second fear, I'll be frank, is the work that is incomplete. Who doesn't know the dimension, the size that piece of work has for an artist? Number one, people who are around you. Second place, the art, the piece of work. Every artist, they fight with that man in black or woman in black and says, "Oh, I cannot go right now because I must finish my work."
Então só tenta straight the point porque a gente está com pouco tempo, né?
So just try to go to straight to the point because we are short in time.
Ah,
Fido.
eu, assim, na prática,
So in practice, with the pandemic, my life changed very little. For this work,
eu tive que ter uma
this
vida, assim,
specific work, I must have had a great discipline to wake up really early, go to bed really
sem nada,
late.
realmente para nada.
I didn't leave home for anything.
Mas é claro, você vai acompanhando
Of
notícias,
course,
acompanhando
you
o que está
follow the
acontecendo fora,
news, follow what
você
happens
percebe que,
outside,
na
and
prática,
it impacts your mind.
e sempre inevitável, traçando um paralelo
It's inevitable not to trace a parallel with the work I was working with. And
livro
Orwell, for example, finished
demora um tempo também,
his book,
naturalmente,
A Race Against Time, because he was sick. It was his
mas é isso, a
last
gente fica
book.
com várias incertezas assim do
We have
que acontece, do futuro, dos
several
acontecimentos,
uncertainty about the future,
mas na
friends,
prática,
what's going to happen, but in practice, very little has changed.
Uma outra pergunta aqui.
Another question here.
Prefiro até, bom, mas vamos dessa da pergunta da Alice Ribeiro.
Let's
Vocês acham
see
que
Alice
a
Ribeiro
adaptação
question.
cria uma
Do you
nova
think
obra
that a
artística? Você
comic
acredita nisso?
adaptation creates another piece of work when you make an adaptation? But I think
Uma nova
you
obra
answered it. If you think that 1984 is a new piece of work,
ela, bom, certamente é,
well,
é uma nova obra, uma linguagem que
yeah, it's a new piece of work. It's a language that wasn't done before. Nobody had done 1984 comics, but we maintain the essence, are all Orwell's words. It's a new piece of work, as books, theater play adaptation, and
mas é,
so on. I know that time is short. I'd like to say something. It's good that it's missing many things to talk about. Time flew, and I want to have more invitations, more talks. Obviously, it's a new piece of work, a new language. From this question, I'd like to pose something. If the adaptation elevates the interest for literature, yes, it leads the interest to omics. It's not an inferior art that must be subordinate. Sometimes people say that adaptation leads to an interest to comics. It's a great art in the 20th century. Otherwise, you cannot talk about the 20th century. For example, Miles Gain from Spiegelman and Gain, who is Japanese. This is something that I'd like to highlight here. And reading leads to reading, but I'd like not to subordinate it. Yes, intelligence leads to intelligence. The problem is the desert too. Who makes adaptation makes start being an author as well. So I'd like to advance things here. For example, my personal works. The Russian Bulgakov is a genius. He didn't. He just. He has Mestre Margarida, a book that inspired Rolling Stones to compose Sympathy for the Evil. It's in my next project, following what Rodrigo gave me to trust me. And after Porto Alegre comes Avila, the Ville, where I live. So intelligence generates intelligence. Comics generates books, and vice
você
versa.
aproveitou porque eu fiz a pergunta, deu o nome errado, a
Yes.
pessoa errada.
So I gave the wrong name of the person.
É, acho que
And you answered Alice Ribeiro. Do you think that comic adaptation, you answered it in a creative way, do you think that put youngsters closer to this piece of work? Yes, and you answered it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Muito
that's
bom.
the
Você vê
case.
como a gente está numa mesa do
As
Brasil
we are
falando
in the nick of time and on the table with our
antes de
Brazilian
chegar
publishers,
só
we can talk
do
a little
potencial
bit
da
about the
internacionalização.
potential of internationalization of our comics. How do you feel that?
Guazzelli, nós vamos vender Porto Alegre lá fora.
Guazzelli, we are going to
Agora,
sell
esse
Porto
potencial desses
Alegre
dois são
internationally
muito,
abroad. The potential of these
são
two
muito
books, Porto
nativos
Alegre, Avila,
europeus,
they are following the
modernados, né?
European
E
frameworks, the
lógico que nós vamos ter
statics
quadros
part,
agora no
and
começo do ano, vai
1984
ter
that I
quadros
don't
chegando
know.
daqui a pouco.
It's going to be launched
Então, tem um
shortly.
potencial enorme
It has a great potential
de internacionalização por conta do
to be
nome George Orwell,
international
né?
because of the name George
Como
Orwell.
disse, Fido.
For the moment,
Então,
as Fido
tem que
said, it's a
precisar
great moment, a
ter
strong
pessoas
moment. What do you think about
que
it?
tenham
How do
experiência
you see it?
de
Have you
exportar
had any
coisas
experience to
novas.
export the copyright of your
Rodrigo,
works?
vocês têm alguma coisa para
Do
contribuir
you
com
have
isso?
anything
Fica à vontade.
to add to that? Fido
É,
first.
agora, bom, no caso do. Vai ser minha primeira experiência
So this is going
publicar
to be my
lá
first
para fora.
experience to
Seria
publish
a primeira vez
abroad. I'm
em quase,
really
na verdade,
excited about it.
se não me engano,
1984, we have
onde
a
ele
list
foi
of 12
lançado,
countries that
foram
this
duas vezes
book
já
is
para
going to be
ser
launched,
Então,
negotiations, and so
recentemente eu
on.
venho
And
acompanhando
it's
muitas
interesting that I've
editoras
been following
que mandam
several publishers
PDF, né,
from abroad. They send
muita
me
informação,
the
muita
PDF
arte,
file, the diagrams I
especificações da
check
arte.
to know if the art is
Mas eu
okay.
acho que não, pensando no,
But
se tem potencial ou não dos brasileiros
thinking about having this
estarem
potential, this power to show our work abroad,
não existem barreiras assim, não
I think
existem
there
fronteiras
isn't any
geográficas.
barrier or to say, oh, the trace of this artist
Imagens
doesn't fit with another
se a
country, for
obra
example.
fala
We don't have that anymore.
para
If
várias
the piece of work
localizações,
communicates
para
to other
para
people from other
aparecer lá
nations,
fora. Como
it
tem
has everything
muitos
to be
brasileiros,
shown
gosto muito do
outside.
trabalho do Marcelo
I
de
like the
Salete,
work of Marcelo Di
que
Saletti
ganhou o Arte
works.
agora
He won the Weiser now some time ago
Cúmbia,
in Cumbia Jenga.
disseminando trabalho, já tem
He's
publicação em
disseminating
alguns
his
países,
work. His work
Marcelo
is being
Quintanilha
launched
também,
in several
eu acho que
countries.
não
Marcelo
houve assim,
Quintanilha as
nunca
well
foi
is doing the
tão
same. And the moment has never been so
disseminado
good
entre os
to
brasileiros.
disseminate the Brazilian writers. And with great joy, I see it the same way. This is happening with the Brazilian animation. I also work with animation. What we have today is a window. I tell my students I have a good and bad news. The bad news is that we are in apocalypse time, and the good one is that we had never had so great possibility to be in the world. I directed a movie remotely, and this is increasing. We have quality, and I thank all the possible agents that can see us, the agents as people that act in the world to understand that more than that, Fido, Brazil didn't use all its power. This is my personal analysis that in many countries in which we have comics that is strong in France, but there is a saturation, maybe because of quality, and we have new narratives. And the Argentinians, they have done this for a long time. And we don't have these barriers from the past. We surpassed that past. Oh, their work is not so good, but we can help them. This doesn't exist. We are winning awards, Bologna, etc. So I am optimist in the action, pessimist in the analysis. Pessimist in analysis, optimist in the action. This wasn't said by me. Fido, this is already happening. Maybe you can get your award, Fido, very soon. We must be confident that we are the same, on the same level of the other artist, and having new narratives. This is
Nosso
important.
tempo agora,
I think our time is up.
Tem o áudio aqui que tem uma
I
igreja
have a bell here
uma ponte
as a neighboring church. So it's midday sharp now.
só
I think that as a wrap up, if you want to say anything, to convey any message,
desfecho bacana aí para mim.
just to have a good wrap up, if you want, we can
Curto uma pergunta também.
Não, eu
close
acho
it that way.
né? Eu vou ser
Because
bem.
of time
Vou
restriction, I'll
chatear.
be really brief. I'm really
A
hurt,
certeza de que
sad, because the time flew. And this topic,
eu me sinto
we
muito
have
feliz.
several unfoldings, and I feel really happy to have
Vou cortar.
contributed. But it was a debate that was very short. And that
Para no
happened
futuro,
because there are
ou
several
não,
points to address.
eu gostaria
In the future, remotely
porque
or
eu
not,
tenho
I'd like to be present here because I admire people who are here.
vou seguir trabalhando. Eu já falei o que eu tô fazendo.
I'll keep on working.
Aberta.
I told you that
Mas
I'm
as
still
portas
working. I
abertas.
have my open doors with
Nossa.
social distancing, but my open door for this
No
development.
São
We are going to do this crossing
essa
and save ourselves using creation,
da
literature, and art.
enfeite. Somos
We are
peças
not ornaments. We have fundamental
bem-estar.
role in economy and mental
Então a minha fé
well-being of people. My faith in life is based
Obrigado,
on the
Tati.
creation process. Thank you
Fido.
very much. Fido.
Achei que passou absurdamente rápido.
Yes, I also thought that the time flew
Prazer.
as well. It was a great honor and pleasure to Guazzelli. I really miss you to have talks to you. When we get together, it's always good to talk to you. Don't forget
O livro do Bulgakov,
to
Mestre
do the
Margarida.
Bulgakov his book, Mr. Margarida.
Vou confessar que esse era um que
I
estava na minha
envy
lista.
you because it was in my list. Oh,
Dele.
maybe to create
não
a
deixe-
comic book using his work. Yes, do it, please, Guazzelli.
Você
This is
terminou
it.
falando realmente a criação
The
física.
creation, as Guazzelli said,
Nesses nossos tempos parece que ela
at these times,
é ligada totalmente ao
I think they were
mas ao que vai
putting set aside, but it's something that can save us. It's extremely important for everyone.
Conjunto aí, né?
Why not both?
Tô pensando talvez
You
só em
working
ilustrar. Calma aí,
together,
viu? Não,
maybe illustrating. Take it easy. Comics, we get tired sometimes, but I want to do something with Master Margarida. Maybe I can do the illustration or the comic part. I would be really happy. The publisher you have.
Agora, bom, queria agradecer então, Guazzelli.
That's good. Guazzelli, thank you. Fido, thank you. Fernanda Dantas, wonderful manager of Brazilian publisher. Thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful discussion roundtable. And we can create volume 2, volume 3, and continue these as a series. Maybe we can do that in Frankfurt or in another way together with Brazilian publisher to continue this talk. Yeah, the interpreter had a difficult mission. He had the mission to translate our things. Oh, I think it was difficult for the interpreter to translate everything I said into English. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.